Yeah, so I think we were on the day-to-day changes, or how do you kind of look at money on a daily basis. So I think
Yes.
handling expenses is a good idea, right? I know right now a lot of us are sitting at home. I've been guilty of this, the very, checkout on Amazon, and it's very
Yeah.
retail therapy is real, right? But just understand what you're spending on. I think that itself will tell you again about what you can cut down on versus not. I would say we like strike a balance between, like, we don't also recommend being a penny pincher, right? Like, you don't have to, look at like, oh, I bought like coffee for like 200 rupees or whatever, right? Like that stuff, again, indulge a little. It helps keep us sane, but also strike a balance between that and, like, just splurging, right? So I think that's one. Two is involve. So depending on, where you are in life and family situation, etc., these conversations are super critical. Like, usually women don't kind of get involved or are kind of left out of these conversations, even though, to your point, we may be managing a lot more in terms of household expenses, right? So we know what we're spending on groceries and, all of that. But how do you plan out both short-term and long-term financial goals, right? So if you're married, sit down with your spouse. If you're not, just, talk to whoever you're with, parents or siblings or any your sort of extended family, but just participate in these conversations, because that's where you learn, that's where you will, understand what questions to ask. And it's not to say, like, I know we keep saying we depend on the men in our lives, but it's not like men have it all figured out either, right? Like, we're all kind of sort of in
Absolutely.
boat, just gender roles wise, it's sort of come onto them. In fact, I also tell folks, like, it's also unfair, right, for men to have that burden. Like, when I look back at my, like, parents' lives, my dad kind of just managed all of it. He was, the primary income earner. He took all the decisions. And I'm like, Dad, how did you do it, right? Like, it's hard to
Yeah.
do all of that. Plus, for we were a family of four, right? So even, like, help your husband out, or, it'll keep everyone just more sane. So I think, yeah, conversations, and just keep up to date with things. And that's what Basis wants to bring. Like, what we do is, if there are announcements, in the market, and there've been a lot, especially in the last 3-4 months, what we do is we sort of break it down to say, like, okay, what does it mean for you, right? Because, to your point, there's a lot of jargon. We don't, there's a lot of numbers being thrown out. And I think on some level, like, finance is designed to be that way. So a lot of people can just make money
Yeah.
off of you. But yeah, what we do is we break it down, right? There's a new tax regime that was announced in this last budget. There's this moratorium on loans. Like, things like FD rates have come down, and, there are changes in, like, employee provident funds. And, so what we do is we kind of break it down and say, like, this is the change. Here's what it means in, like, normal person terms, right? So just stay up to date on that, and that will help you make the right decisions. And yeah, in the environment we're in now, changes are very, very frequent. So it's just important to stay on top of that. And yeah, like I said, you don't need hours and hours every day. It's impossible. We have regular lives. We have work and family and whatever, self-care. And obviously we have to take care of all of that. But just allocate, like, yeah, maybe a few minutes a day, 30 minutes a week. And that's really all you need to kind of be on top of this.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the whole idea about having conversations around finances, because that was actually my next question. Generally, as I've been talking about right from the beginning, how it's generally not a part of our socialization process to talk about finances. Women, they generally tend to shy away from these conversations. We don't talk about how much we make with our friends.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about the kind of family debts our family is in with our fathers or our brothers. And more often than not, this is very it's not conducive to just even growing up that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there are a lot of times when family burdens may, there may be, as you mentioned, all those 4Ds that might happen, and so many things all of a sudden without realizing where to even begin. So how do you think, especially in Indian households, right? How do you think women, and young women, I mean, more young women than ever, how can they sort of start bringing up these conversations with, let's say, their parents or the elders in the family? How does one broach the conversation to, to help equip them with this, or like help them take charge with their finances, not just their own, but families as well? How does one start those conversations?
Very good question, right? So we've seen when women talk to women, there's a little bit of a lower barrier, right, when it comes to this. And I think this is not a money specific thing. I mean, a lot of things around healthcare, reproductive health, all these prior very taboo topics are now getting a little bit more common, right? So I think try to find, I would say, like your inner circle of women, whether it's friends or close, family members, etc. And yeah, like I said before, you'd realize that you're all sort of in the same boat, right? Like, I don't think, someone like I think one of the other things is to just overcome that self-doubt, or just to say, okay, it's just me. I may have these doubts. I may have these problems. I don't understand this. Like, you're not alone. Yeah, pretty sure you won't be alone, even if you sort of bring this up with other people. And start with, again, something like a very basic money challenge you're facing, right? And so I think that would be something, as even like I was talking about retirement. It's such a far off thing for so many of us. So it may be like a an easier thing to really talk about, because it does seem theoretical right now. It's not, as we all know, but yeah, maybe pick a topic like that that's a little bit more like, let's say, lighthearted, etc. Understand who you may have to support. Will you have to take care of parents? Will you have, I mean, if you're not married or you have kids or whatever, right? Like, how is that kind of financial commitment going to look like, right? So I think just pick kind of easier topics. And I think with what are like good ways to get started off, it's sort of the same, right? Like, understand, what is your family like cash flow like, right? Like, who's on much, if you're a household of, multiple people, how much is actually going out as expenses and other things. And, but also take ownership of your individual account. So even if you're married, we always say there's like yours, mine, and ours, right? There needs to be that, of course, you will own things jointly, but then also have your own things, own accounts and own assets, and build all of that. And just start small, ask a lot of questions, educate yourself. So you'll even, once you know the basics, you'll know what questions even to ask, right? About risk and return and financial goals, and how SIPs work, and how to start them, stop them, when to pull out. So many different things just come out. Like, the more you know, right, the more, the more questions you can ask. And I think for the most part, people, like, once like the, that those barriers are crossed, it's really not that big a deal. Given we run a women only community, and initially we'd actually kept it open. We didn't kind of filter out folks by gender, and we realized that men took over all the conversation, literally. Like, no women would say right? And that's the problem. Like, even in real life, physically, if there are men in the room, women tend to take a backseat, and it all stems from this self-doubt, or I don't know enough, or they're the experts, let's just leave it to them. But with women being with women only, we've seen those sort of barriers go away. So I think that could be a good start. And then the other women friends, talk to male members of your family, and see what you all may need to do together or individually, to just make sure, financially everyone's sort of on the same page, because money is one of the biggest factors of even, marriages going wrong, etc. So you don't want to be there.
Absolutely. So, I'm glad you mentioned the whole idea about setting goals and stuff. Because, like, you had this little anecdote about how people in 2020 had financial goals that maybe, something like buying a car, or maybe going for a vacation that they must have been saving up. So, in situations like these, or just generally, we financial goal setting, it's always such a tricky task to do. We either set really unrealistic goals in terms of, like, when, we're going to spend, like, we're going to save 50% of our salary. It's either that, or it's either like I'm in 50% credit card debt. It's either, really unrealistic goals, or it's practically no goals at all. So how does, one become cognizant enough and set realistic financial goals?
Right. So basically, most of our life goals are financial goals, right? So common goals, for young women, millennial women, etc., are things like, let's say I want to go for a master's, higher education, paying for our own weddings. That's becoming more common. Yeah, things like travel, vacation. Now that's stopped for a bit, but that was something people used to save up for. And then, as soon as someone becomes a mom, she starts thinking about, her kids, etc. Now, goals, goals have to be prioritized, right? Like we all may have, like a million things we want to do, whether it's travel, pay for, kids' education, buy a house, take a career break. That's a financial goal that, women may need to plan for. But first things first is just prioritize, like literally list down your top 5 financial goals. And a goal always needs to have sort of 3 parts to it, right? So like saying I'm saving up for travel, that's not a financial goal. Basically, you need to have an amount. So I'm saving up to travel. Actually, travel may not be a great example in today's environment. Let's just say, let's take this car example. I'm saving up, 8 lakhs to buy a car that costs, or whatever, a car costs like 8 lakhs today, and I'm saving up to buy it. And the third part is duration. So it's amount, purpose. So what do you buy? How much does it cost? What are you saving up for, and when? Right? The when will determine how you structure your investments. So whether it's short term, medium term, long, etc. Right? So 3 parts. All goals need to have these. I'm saving up for a car. It costs 8 lakhs today, and I want to buy it in 3 years. Right? That's a financial goal. And then based on the time horizon and the amount, and for folks, and if this is kind of harder to calculate, we've actually built this out in our app as well. So you just basically key in these elements and we'll tell you how much to save every month. But so just work backwards from there. So typically longer term goals, you can start, saving up on a monthly basis, create an SIP and start putting it more into like equity mutual funds, for instance, right? Because equities as an asset class are known to be better for longer term goals. So depending on that duration and that horizon, that's what will determine your investments. So I think, your saving and investment. So just prioritize. And things will change, right? Like for instance, large financial goals are not happening here, but whatever you saved up for travel this year, that's money that you kind of get back, right? So that goes back into maybe something else. So like reprioritize as things change. But I think on any given time, like more than 5 financial goals may not be realistic to plan for. But also keep things in buckets, right? Like your car fund or your children's education fund should not be used to, let's say, buy a car, right? Or go on that. So keep things in their bucket for the purposes they were meant for, unless of course like you had saved up for this amazing trip this year. I'm in that bucket, and we ended up just getting a refund on that, so that could be put to some other use. Sorry, I'm just seeing questions here before we lose them. Our app is called Basis, BASIS. You can find us on the Play Store and App Store, or just go to our Insta handle, Get Basis, which is what I'm using now. And there's a link to download it.
Perfect. All right. Guys, please keep asking your questions. We'll take them up as and when you put them. So whatever questions you have, now is the time for it. All right. So the questions will keep rolling in, and I am going to take this conversation over to the more fun segment, which I like to call the rapid fire section.
Okay.
All right, so let's begin. So what according to you is your personal go-to savings tip? Like, what do you do in your personal life? What is that one savings tip that you apply in your own life?
Okay, I know this is supposed to be rapid. I'm going to have to think about that. I think I'm just with every expense that comes up, I always ask myself, if the absence of it would make a big difference to my life. And if the answer is no, then I don't spend on it. I think it's just a bit.
All right. We have a question here. What's the Get Basis business model?
Okay, good question. So as of now, we're actually pre-revenue. So everything we offer in terms of our education, advice, our communities, etc., is open to all, free of cost. What we are looking to get into, so in a few months from now, what we're working on is launching sort of premium subscription plans. So essentially for like a small, a reasonably priced membership fee, you'll be able to get kind of personalized advice and coaches and kind of more premium content, etc. that will help you, with your personal money and decisions related to that. So that's what we're looking at. But right now, it's everything we're offering is completely free.
All right. Okay, I think that answers a couple of other questions as well because I have a couple of questions here about do you charge anything to get into bases? So not currently, I think, guys. You all can just
Correct.
download the app and get on it. All right. We have a question here. What
Yeah.
are the personal health insurance options for women?
I don't know if I can answer that out here. I think this obviously depends on a variety of things. So I would say, Anvesha, who's asking the question, join the basis community, ask on there, and we'll get an expert to advise on that.
Okay, that's great. All right, back to the rapid fire. This is an easy question. What are you watching or reading currently?
I actually just finished two books thanks to the lockdown. I read this book super popular because it was on Bill Gates' recommendation list. It's called The Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger, who is the Disney CEO. So a very nice story on like building companies, dealing with challenges, etc. And right now, right after that, I finished this book called What It Takes, also about an entrepreneur. So it's by the Blackstone founder, Steve Schwarzman, also about building companies, weathering crises, etc. So these have been my inspirational reading. Podcasts continue to be popular. I have a couple of favorites there too. So yeah, oscillate between books and podcasts.
All right. We have a question here. What's one of the biggest money lies you grew up believing? That's interesting.
Uh, I wouldn't. I don't know, so many things, right? Like when you look back at your life, I think conditioning for women is that
Yeah.
someone will take care of you, right? Like I think I even and this sort of dawned on me, and I'm very, very candid and open here. When Mark Zuckerberg posted this thing on, I'm sorry, I think I'll take a step back. There's a woman who commented on Mark Zuckerberg's like a post saying, you're whatever, it's so smart and blah, blah, blah. And look, all this, what you've built. I'm going to tell my daughter to marry the nerd in her class because you guys, you've done so well. And then Mark Zuckerberg replied saying, why don't you tell her to be the nerd, right? So that
Be the nerd.
be the nerd. And I've definitely like grown up thinking there'll be, my knight in shining armor who'd come in Bollywood, and all these things don't really help. And so, but it's just
Absolutely.
that growing up, I was like, yeah, I'll study. I like, studying and, did well in school and all of that, but someone will take care of, my whatever lifestyle needs and all of that. So I think that was a lie. I also thought that, again, money is such a sensitive, taboo topic that we don't talk about it, right? That's also a lie. Talk about it. Kritiksha, you mentioned that don't even talk about how much we make with our peers. Let's talk about that. Let's fix this gender pay gap. Let's be transparent, right? So I think those are the two lies, that it's not someone else's ability, and it's a topic that should be transparent and open.
Absolutely. It's like the millennial adage that we've all, sort of taken to be the CEO your parents always wanted you to marry.
Exactly. I love that line.
Basically.
I just love
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Took a while
All right.
to really absorb that.
All right. Going back to my next question, what is the one career advice you would give to your younger self?
I would say take more risks. I think as women, we do tend to sometimes overanalyze, etc., etc.
Play
Just
safe.
sometimes take a leap of, yeah. Don't there's no need
Right.
to play safe, especially as a young something-year-old. So yeah, take more.
Absolutely. All right. What's your biggest fear?
Um, okay, I don't know if I have a big, and I know this might be too cliched, but losing people. I think a support system is, even as we're like, building. I mean, you guys are entrepreneurs. We're building out a platform. I think your support system is probably the biggest factor that determines, your well-being, etc. So I think just not having that is what is my biggest fear.
Absolutely. All right. What, according to you, was your biggest career faux pas or something you regret doing?
I don't. I think my career's played out the way it has. I think things in hindsight, I do wish I had, like, so this is part of being the playing safe category. I stayed in a corporate job for the first nearly 6 years of my career. So I was at Goldman Sachs for, about 5.5, little over 5.5 years. I would have, if I had to redo that, I think I would. I loved it as a first job, but I think I would have probably tried to stay there maybe 3 years or so, and then go and do some more startup-esque, which is
Yeah.
what I'm living that dream now. So no, but I think that was a thing where I played it too safe for a little bit longer than I could have. So that would be my thing. Yeah.
That's I think all of us relate to this, you know. I mean, just being comfortable, being safe.
Right.
We have a question here. Do you believe in minimalism, and is it possible in today's life where we are mindless consumers? Yes, we are mindless consumers.
So I'm not a believer in. I think if things make you happy, go for it, right? But like I said before, there is this fine balance between being like a penny pincher and a splurger, right? So allocate some amount of your monthly expenses or your income for something that it's just for you, right? You like to indulge, etc. Don't I think there are a lot of these these things about, even in personal finance, where like, oh, you could, and that instead of spending that 300 rupees or 400 rupees on a Starbucks coffee, like invested in an SIP instead. Like those things I think are a little too extreme. Like, hey, I like
Yeah,
to get to that, but minimalism, I think if things make you happy, do it. I mean, the crisis has also made us just naturally be conscious of a lot of things we're spending on. It's forced us to not spend on a lot of stuff too, right? We've not realized it, but I think the usual things we spend on, we don't. So I would say it's a very personal thing. But don't, I mean, if we're earning and we're building a career or whatever it is, like spend it on yourself. Like don't, I would say don't stinge or be miserable.
absolutely. We have a question here on the lines of your, okay, sorry. What's one biggest career advice you'd like to give to a startup?
Wait, I don't under, could you clarify what's one biggest to a startup?
Advice you'd give to a startup, yes.
I'm a startup too, so we're kind of figuring out a few things. I think just being resilient is the biggest thing you can be as someone either running a startup or in the early days of a startup, because things people say there are ups and downs in building something new. In the first, I would say in the initial stages, it's mostly downs. So just be resilient, be thick-skinned, be comfortable with uncertainty, and once you're able to overcome that, you should be good.
Absolutely. We have an interesting personal question here on the lines of your own career trajectory. What made you finally take the leap of faith and start Bases?
Okay, so this again, I'm going to give you the very honest. It was at the back of my mind to do something about this, because it
Right.
started based on my own personal pain points. So I can tell that story really quickly. I got into business school in the US and didn't really plan on how I was going to pay for it. And as we all know, that's not a trivial sum, right? Education abroad, that too for higher studies. So that was kind of my
Yes.
call in my when I was 27, 28, right? And this is when I realized that I'd had enough time to plan and I didn't do it. Something needs to be done about this. But taking that leap of faith, it happened. I think post B school, I'd returned to India and, just sort of understanding that this problem is so widespread, and also knowing that I was at a place in my career where I could take a risk and, not necessarily need that stable corporate job with stable, consistent income every month. So it was a combination of different things. But yeah, I think it was one of those things where I just decided that I'm going to do it and give it my all. Because, and I did go through this pros and cons. I still have a pros and cons list, that I created very early. And to be honest, with entrepreneurship, the cons do outweigh the pros, right? If you look at it very, very rationally, like think about
That's
how
very true.
many small businesses will survive, etc. But you need to have that irrational optimism. Like, yeah, I'm going to give this my best shot. There's a market for it. I have, some hypotheses that I want to test out, and yeah, and it did help. One of my really good friends from middle school, and she joined me in kind of building this out. So Deepika, who's my co-founder and financial expert. So it helps to have